Welcome to our quick tip video series with the Executive Advisory. And today our topic is going to be how to stay sane and resilient through chaos, a timely topic for most of us, if not all of us right now. The quote that we want to start with is when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. This is by Viktor Frankl. Some of you may be familiar with his book, Man's Search for Meaning. He's an author, a neurologist, and was a Holocaust survivor. And what's interesting is, what we're going through is by no means as difficult as what he had survived. But a lot of us right now are in situations where we don't know what to expect, and we're experiencing some of these things for the first time, and especially the level of where the country is in terms of health and social distancing. So if there's so much that we can't control, how do we focus on what we can control within ourselves? And so we thought the topic might be useful. This is something that you can share with your teams, and or feel free to send out to family members or friends that you feel like this might be helpful. But as we're seeing the world kind of unfold, there's just a lot of chaos that we're noticing. So how do we stay sane and resilient? First, let's look at what is actually resilience. And it's the ability to persevere through obstacles, through an optimistic vision for the future, and a resourceful approach to resolving issues. And there's two things in this that we want to make sure that you're catching is that one, this optimistic vision for the future. And that's really sometimes hard to hold on to when all we're getting is embedded with the news of all the negative things that might be going on or difficulties that we might be facing. But it's critical in terms of the ocean is kind of volatile and the waters are choppy. You want to know where you're sailing to, and if you don't believe you can get anywhere, then you end up just treading water for the longest time. That's not really the best approach. And then also the next thing is being resourceful. The only way that our brain really gets invited to be resourceful is that we believe that there's something else to achieve. We believe that we're able to achieve it. And we basically send our brain on a creative mission. How do we come up with different ways and different things, notice opportunities and resources that if we're so focused on kind of all the things coming in at us, we tend to miss, or our brain is really on a mission of how to kind of hold strong and weather the storm versus resolve things and take advantage of opportunities that are out there. So how do we do this? One, let's just sit and think about what actually causes the uncertainty. It's always external things that we didn't plan on. Global tragedies, economic challenges, industry disruption, leadership changes, organizational reorganizations, personal challenges. And, we're all kind of seeing a level of being hit in any of these areas right now on the news to different degrees. But the truth of the matter is we've always lived in an uncertain world. The only thing that we've been able to control are our thoughts and our decisions and actions. Everything else, because maybe it felt predictable, we get this sense of certainty, this kind of false sense of things are going to always play out a certain way. And our brain wants that routine and that kind of pattern so that it can focus on getting things done. When there's a lot of uncertainty and chaos and things coming that we didn't plan on, our brain is so kind of, how do I survive this, that it's really hard to focus. However, the idea is, so how do we start to find those little threads of certainty in all of this? So I love this quote. When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You'll always find people helping. Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, a lot of us, depending on when you grew up, this was, and now that there's been the recent movie with Tom Hanks, but this is an individual who honestly, when you watch his show, I know I did as a child, you saw some things getting tackled, and his whole focus was how do you help children kind of navigate all the uncertainty. But I find as adults we don't always have this magical skill set that maybe we picked up as we grew up. But there is this idea of how do you train your brain to look for the helpers, to look for the positive, to look for the opportunities. And this is part of what I would call operating and training yourself to be a thermostat versus a thermometer. If you think of it, a thermostat is always kind of focused on how does it manage to create the temperature that it's programmed to do. So here it's showing 72 degrees. How do you maintain that? And the environment on the outside, whether it's cold or hot, the thermostat has to take that into account. It doesn't ignore the fact that things are getting colder or hotter. Just the opposite. It pays attention to it, but it pays attention to it with a goal in mind. The goal being to keep the temperature at a certain range. Where a thermometer is absolutely reactive to anything going on outside of itself. If it's colder, the temperature drops. If it's hotter, the temperature goes up. So it's this idea of when I hear people go, well, Heather, how do we make a decision, or how do we move forward? Or when clients reach out to us and we're working with us, well, I don't know how to plan for anything because who knows what's going to happen. That's a little bit of that thermometer talking. A thermostat goes, we don't know what's happening. Here's some things I do know for sure. Here's what I know I want to accomplish. Let's talk about what actions we can do, what makes sense at this time to move forward, even if we're moving forward at baby steps right now. Or it does make sense to pause and wait. And in the meantime, while we're doing that, here's what we're going to focus on. So to get our brain to operate more like a thermostat, we have to really pay attention to what mindset is it sitting in. And there's 3 types of mindsets: safety mode, looking good mode, strategic and helpful mode. And the way that we break this down is safety mode is someone who's in that kind of drowning stage, and it's usually some level of our physical survival feels threatened. Now, I am hoping that everybody's safe and at home and taking care of their family and loved ones, and that the true physical safety is not a threat. But because there's so much news around the economy and businesses are having to close for temporarily, there is this kind of innate feeling of, well, how does that impact my ability to pay for my physical survival? Or resources are being taken away in the grocery store. So that sense can get triggered really easily. When we're in safety mode, we're in the hyper stage of fear mode. And the back side of our brains, the anterior side of our brains are really kind of looking more at, it's wired. And if you think about it, our brains have been wired for physical survival for centuries. And so it's like an Olympic runner's leg. It's so ready to kick into flight, freeze, or fight. And right now, at a time like this, if you're really not under true physical threat, it's not the most effective way to engage in things. If you're in an alley and someone, it looks dangerous, then yes, you want to kick into that gear. You want to either fight back or freeze, or hide in a corner or run away. But when it's a situation like this, where this is much more of an emotional, interpersonal challenge for the most part, then you don't want to leverage that. The next one is looking good mode. Looking good mode is, how well do I look to others? And believe it or not, because a lot of you or either your team members are in this remote working experience, sometimes for the first time, definitely most companies are experiencing with this 100% remote work is very different than the sometimes or flexible work approach that some companies have taken. So how do I not feel like I'm disappearing? How do I know that my manager still kind of knows about me, is connected with me, that my team is connected to me, that I matter? Because there's so much stuff going on right now. So when that happens, we start to kind of, we show up really well as long as we feel like we look good. And the minute that we don't get that sense, we start to do these passive aggressive things in terms of either over promoting ourselves or throwing people under the bus. Both safety mode and looking good mode are really about, preserving ourselves. It's fear-based. Strategic and helpful mode is actually the only mode that we're in that's a thermostat. Looking good mode and safety mode are thermometer. Strategic and helpful mode, though, requires us to be optimistic, hopeful, and be able to self-soothe so that our brains are calm and they're able to see the bigger picture. The way that I like to compare it is, if you've got a deer in the field, you'll notice the animals looking around, able to notice where the other deer are, notice to see where the food is. But if they hear a rustle, a line, a threat of some sort, they freeze and then they focus on an escape route. And the brain is 100% completely not paying attention to all the other food resources and the other deer. It's, where's my exit route? And so, it's really hard to be resilient and have a focus and notice the opportunities if we're in looking good mode or safety mode. So how do we get to strategic and helpful mode? As I mentioned, we need to have some hope. Hope equals resourcefulness. If we believe something is possible that can turn out better, even in the midst of a lot of negative obstacles, then that's what invites our brain to be creative, to look for opportunities. If we're in fear mode, it really reduces the level of resourcefulness we have. We tend to tell ourselves stories about what's not possible. So our brain hears that and goes, well, if it's not possible, why would I bother thinking about it or trying to come up with solutions? So how do you shift it? How do you make sure that you're moving in that? This is something called locus of control, and we tend to flex whether we see an external or internal locus of control. But this is how you know that you're operating off of an external locus of control. Is notice how this individual is kind of stagnant on the screen, and there's a circle around it. That's your environment. There's pluses and minuses. There's obstacles and there's opportunities, and the arrows show that the feeling is that things are coming in at us. And you'll hear the language of those people are lucky because good things are coming to them, and I'm unlucky because bad things are coming to me, or those people did this so I had to do this. There's a very kind of what people might call a victim language, and what it's really saying is I'm not in control of anything and the environment's just coming in at me. It's a very high stress mode to operate in. Internal locus of control, notice that this individual, this figure, is in action mode. It's still dealing with the same kind of environment and setting. So this is the same person. This is just about shifting your mindset, not shifting circumstances. And the circumstances are the same kind of negative things, obstacles, as well as opportunities. But this time the arrow is focused on the person moving towards something. And that is that goal. What is it that they're trying to achieve? Having a goal, having a purpose is actually what moves it from you having to react to the environment to you seeing the environment as maybe an obstacle course, but you're looking to run to the finish line. So that means the hurdle that might have felt like a dead end is actually just a roadblock and a detour. And there's things now all of a sudden, if you've got a target that you're after, it's easier to assess your environment and go, what works in my favor, what doesn't work in my favor, and look for those opportunities. You have 100% control over whether or not you're navigating this from an external locus of control. The environment controls what happens to me, or an internal locus control. I control how I navigate the environment. To do this, you have to reshape the story of uncertainty that you're telling yourself. And we're all telling ourselves stories about what's happening and unfolding. An external locus of control story tends to focus on the negative and the inability to do anything about it. So an example is everything is getting worse and worse with no end in sight. And someone could look at that and go, well, that's true. Look at all these bad things that are happening, and I have no idea when it's going to end. I'm just being realistic. Well, there's an equally true story that you can tell, and it's nowhere, it's not any less authentic or embracing reality, but it invites the brain to do something about it. So an internal locus of control story would be, we've got a lot of unexpected events that have happened recently. Okay, that's true. We're not sure what's happening next. That's true too. What makes sense to do to move towards our goal? So it's inviting the brain, what could we do? What's an option? And if the response is there's nothing that can be done, that is 100% an external locus control, because their thought is, I can't do anything about what others are doing or what's happening out there. An internal locus control, when you ask that question, what makes sense or what can we do? It's asking themselves, what can I do in this moment? And the answer might be, you know what, in this moment, I'm just going to take advantage of the pause and I'm going to do some reading. I'm going to do some time with my family. Or it might be, you know what, this is a great time to do some learning, some development, maybe do some proactive planning for the future. And it might even be, what are those small things? Let's take it one day at a time. What's that one piece that we can move? As we're working with teams and leaders, a lot of times it feels like it's all or nothing, and they're missing just what are the small steps we can take today. And then how do we practice choosing those right stories? As I said, the idea is that we're inviting what's called a growth mindset. A growth mindset is, through everything that we're experiencing, our brain is constantly learning. And so it's less of what went wrong or what's going wrong, and more of what am I learning from this, and how is that helping inform and shape the decisions that I'm making. And this comes from the psychologist and author Carol Dweck. She's got a lot of great videos out there, as well as a book. Exceptional people seem to have a special talent for converting life setbacks into future success. And what we want to emphasize is this special talent is not something that we're necessarily born with, though some of us may have been raised by families who instilled more of a growth mindset. I can't say that I have, and I don't know a lot of people that did. A lot of us are trying to unpack that. So we have to kind of relearn how we approach these kind of areas of uncertainty. So don't think of it as something that some people have and some people don't. Think of it as a skill set that we can cultivate. Some reading materials that we recommend, and a lot of these authors have videos as well and podcasts. So check out Daring Greatly, and that's by Brene Brown. A lot of you are familiar with her work. She's got a lot of great videos out there and speaking around how do you really, get your brain working on your behalf. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. That's the person that we referenced at the beginning of this video. It's a great book about purpose. It's definitely a deep read. And then Carol Dweck, we just mentioned, Mindset's one of her books. And then The Resilience Breakthrough by Christian Moore. Just a lot of great practical tips around exercises and things that you might be able to do with your team or yourself or your families to make sure that you're cultivating resilience. As always, we are here to help. So if, feel free to share that video with anyone that you think might find it useful. And if you want to discuss further things that we can do to help support you and your team during this time and ongoing, feel free to reach us out. You can reach out to us. You can reach us on the website, and our phone number is listed there at the bottom of the screen. Stay safe out there, and we hope to talk to you soon.